for our meeting today. And our theme for 2020 is spiritual vision. Our talk title today is Let's Get Together and Feel All Right. And August's theme is inclusion in action. I invite you to close your eyes as we breathe in and out for a moment. In this space, I invite you to set an intention, bringing your awareness and our awareness together of our unity and our oneness. In your mind's eye, you can imagine a one lit candle. And we bless this space of our service and our time together. And we recognize the divine presence that moves through and is all things. And knowing that this presence of love expresses as each of us in the most divine, unique, and beautiful of ways. I know that we are blessed by this time together, and we're each renewed in our remembrance of love, peace, wholeness, and connection. I give thanks for everyone who makes our service possible today, and may the energy of love that is generated here bless us all abundantly. And so it is. And at this time, we move into our meditation with Reverend Sunday Cote.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to move into an extended meditation, about 8 to 10 minutes. And today we're going to practice what Shenzhen Young calls bliss breath. And I'm giving a special acknowledgement to my meditation teacher, Marcy Crawford, for sharing this meditation with me. So let's just take a moment to stretch up your spine and just allow yourself to relax around that. Move into a meditation posture that feels comfortable to you. And just continue to take some few long, slow breaths. Noticing how the inhale inflates the body and facilitates that stretching up. And notice each time you exhale, you might just surrender a bit more to the gravity, to just allowing your spine to support the posture, and everything else just relaxes so that you can rest. And just explore how the breath can support positivity in the emotional body. Breath is always available. So we're going to tune in to what is naturally positive in the inhale and the exhale of the breath. So we're just going to maintain our intention on the breath, returning to it when we might get distracted. So the next time you have a nice inhale, see if you can tune into that fact that you are absolutely being flooded with the most fundamental need for life. Oxygen is flooding into your body, nourishing your body and your brain. And just notice this for the next few breaths, seeing if you can just soak in even more to the pleasant emotion that can be triggered by the influx of life-giving elements to your brain, to every cell of your body. And as you're focusing on the in-breath, you don't have to, but you could choose a label or a mantra. It could just be life. Every time you inhale in, you're noticing that life-giving quality of the very breath moving into your body. Take a moment to also notice the positive emotion that is available with every exhale. So each time you breathe out, there's a little physical relaxation somewhere in the body, just by virtue that there are muscles that need to let go in order to release the breath. So let's just tune into this on purpose, to the fact that how that can impact the emotional body. What's being held can rest now. What's been tense or resisting can be let go of. Give a little bit more ease. And in fact, that can be your mantra or your label. That on the in-breath, you might just say life. And on the out-breath, ease. As you do this, there might be a sense of compassion, of gentle, loving kindness towards yourself, of receiving of love from Source itself or from God that allows you to just rest 1,000 times a day, every time you exhale. Oh, what a gift. Life on the inhale, ease on the exhale. Just like any practice we might do, we might notice something that is not positive coming up. And if it does, you can just choose to practice equanimity, just allowing that to go to the background as we continue to bring our attention back to nurturing the positivity of the gentle bliss of being alive that's available every moment of the breath. Let's just continue for a few more minutes on the nourishment that courses through our body every time we inhale, the rush of life itself. And then the ease, the gift of rest that allows us to let go with every exhale. Life and ease. Just soak into the positivity that this practice brings into your being, into your body, into your mind. And be grateful that this is a practice that we can do at any time. Our breath is always with us. And as we begin to move out of this focused meditation time, just know that you can continue this practice kind of in the background if you'd like. Just tuning in and noticing every so often this breath of life that's filling your being with this grateful awareness of life itself. And that at every exhale, you can just let go and relax, being in this present moment. And so it is. So I love that time that we spend together to deepen into our awareness of the practice that we do. And so as Kristen mentioned, our talk, our focus on the whole month of August is inclusion in action. And today the talk title is Let's Get Together and Feel All Right. And you probably know that from the Bob Marley song. And of course, we know that these topics were picked months in advance. And so it's kind of an ironic thing to be talking about right now during a pandemic, that as social creatures, it is imperative to us, to our survival, that we get together physically, that we get together socially, and yet getting together physically right now can make us feel not so all right, and that it's vital for us at this time to actually stay apart. So we're kind of in this paradox, this contradictory place of just needing to be together, and it's important and necessary for us to do that, and at the same time knowing that we have to stay apart physically, or practice our social distancing. And so gratefully we have lots of ways to do that, like right now through our connection virtually. And I know last night I connected with some of my homeschool friends, moms from Arizona, where my kids grew up for quite a few years. And so I've known these moms and friends about 16 years now. So it's so good to just connect and remember that shared history we have together, and to talk about where our kids are now, and just that deep connection and shared history together is just so powerful. So it's coming together, so very, very necessary for us. So in the Bob Marley song, though, that the main lyrics, and actually the title of the song, is one heart, one mind. And so even though we are remembering the importance of us being together physically and literally, really that is such a powerful recognition for us to know that we also come together in this idea of one heart, one love. Recognizing that connection is such a powerful thing for us to do. And so we're probably all aware of the Sanskrit greeting namaste, which basically means the divine in me greets and acknowledges the divine in you. And you might have recently seen the little take on that, that says the mask I wear honors you, and the mask you wear honors me, and it's called Namaste. So I'm sorry, I had to get that in. And so this is a great idea. This is a powerful idea, right? And I love this idea that when we greet each other, that we acknowledge the divine presence in you and the divine presence in me, that we're all individualized expression of this one love, of this one heart. But I want to go a little further, because there's an African concept called Umbutu. And that takes this idea of our divine oneness and it expands it a level. So Umbutu means I am because we are. It's a celebration of our common humanity and the awareness that I couldn't be me without you. I can't be me without the support and the connection with all of us. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu explained the essence of Umbutu this way. He said, my humanity is inextricably bound up in yours, in your humanity. We can't disentangle that. And his granddaughter wrote a book called Everyday Ubuntu. And she talks about how it's really important to have the self-examination, which we do really well in our teaching of this self-improvement and our own connection. But she says that Ubuntu teaches us to also look outside ourselves to find answers. It's about seeing the bigger picture, the other side of the story. So Ubuntu, she says, is about reaching out to our fellow men and women through whom we might just find comfort, contentment, and a sense of belonging that we crave, this getting together. So it tells us that individuals are nothing without other human beings. It encompasses everyone, regardless of race or creed or color. It embraces our differences and it celebrates them. And so this is the essence of the inclusivity of celebrating and including the diverse nature of life as it shows up in individuals. And it's one of our basic values, stated values for Centers for Spiritual Living is diversity and inclusion. And Dr. Holmes talks about the inclusion of diversity often, and he reminds us that unity does not mean uniformity. So it's not the goal that when we acknowledge our oneness that we all have to be the same, that we're all trying to, be absolutely the same. If that were the case, we'd be all pretty boring, right? We'd all be like robots, right? Or just this big blob of energy. Dr. Holmes made it really clear that even though we're one, we maintain this individualized expression, this diverse idea of ourselves. And he talks about this in his statement of what our principles are. And I want to read this quote from him. And sometimes, it gets lost sometimes, but it's like a key point in our teaching. And he says, this idea of oneness of God is not a philosophy of absorption or nihilism. We do not become absorbed in the universal self to the loss of individuality. Quite the opposite. We find ourselves not absorbed, but immersed in a universality, each one being a unique, individual, and different manifestation of that which is one, undivided, indivisible, and whole. We cannot think of a spirit as static, but as ever unfolding in its divine nature. And that's a big statement, right? But the way that impacts is that even though we are connected in this oneness, but there's this amazing quality of maintaining our individual expression of that. And the fact that we can do that, the fact that we can evolve and change and grow as individuals in this oneness is the proof that spirit is not static, that it's not this ultimate thing to just become this one static idea, but that it's this beautiful dance and expression of diversity and connection in this way that we evolve. And that's a very powerful thing for us to remember as we continue our spiritual practices. And it bears out in nature itself. Richard Rohr talked about observing nature. He says, we see that diversity is essential to balance, wholeness, and resilience. Ecosystems thrive when a variety of species of plants and animals nourish each other. Diverse environments are much stronger and less susceptible to pests and disease than monocrop fields. And you might know this if you're a gardener and you only have one crop, and then the Japanese beetle come in and kills your whole crop, as opposed to if you have variety and other plants that can actually repel pests and make things stronger. And then if something gets eaten, there's other things, right? So we can't have this mono crop culture. And we can't have that with humans either, because as Richard Rohr says, the world is a relational system full of complex interdependence among very different creatures. If we want sustainable communities, we must also welcome the other and learn to see our neighbors as ourselves. Without it, we do not have community at all, just egoic enclaves, just separate, same enclaves. And so this is what, part of our vision of recognizing our innate oneness with our source, but then we go forward with that, and we say that oneness with each other and with our planet and with life itself. And then recognizing that we act, and how we act around that, one way is that we get together, that we learn from each other, that we grow from each other, that we honor and we respect that diversity. And then we realize, when we realize this is that Umbutu, I am because we are. And many studies show that when there's diversity in the workplace, there's more creativity, there's more ingenuity, there's more success. When we are able to move out of our bubble of comfort and understanding, there's a whole new set of resources that come forward for us. So when we realize this, when we connect with others, then we have more compassion for each other. We have more compassion for what's the experiences, because we connect at a deeper level. So it's one good thing that has come out of this pandemic, is that over and over again, we realize our interdependence, right? And we see the generosity of others around us. We see the help and the sharing of resources, and the connecting where someone doesn't have something to be able to bring that forward. And so this is Ubuntu. This is I am because we are. This is the celebration of our shared humanity. Dwayne Elgin says, when we discover that all beings are part of the seamless fabric of creation, it naturally awakens in us a sense of connection with and compassion for the rest of life. We automatically broaden our scope of empathy and concern when we realize that we are inseparable from all that exists. We no longer see ourselves as isolated entities whose being stops at the edge of our skin, and whose empathy stops with our family or our race or our nation. We see that because we all arise simultaneously from a deep ocean of life energy. A vital connection always exists between all beings. That's a powerful statement, to realize that as we do this spiritual work, as we understand our oneness and our connection, it grows our empathy, it grows our compassion, it grows our connection and our appreciation and our joy and our love for diversity. And one of the ways that we do this, the way we change our understanding, is because we get together and we communicate with each other. We share stories. Yuval Noah Harari, in his book *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, it's a really great book. If you haven't read it, it's pretty detailed. But he talks about this very idea of when our species began to dominate, was when we gained the ability to communicate in more detail than other animals. So we have a way of being able to communicate, and because we're able to communicate, we're able to survive in larger groups. We are able to come together and feel all right. And so part of that is because we can communicate, we can talk, and we tell stories and we learn about each other. And I know that several of our community members are studying the 4 agreements right now. And one of the agreements is about having being impeccable with our word. And there's this kind of this thought about, well, how does gossip play into that? How do when we're being impeccable with our word, what about the stories we tell about other people? And of course, there's valuable practice to be in integrity, right? To not share harmful things or untruths about others or painful things. But Yuval Noah Harari reminds us that gossip was how we developed relationships, how we figured out who was trustworthy and who was dependable. It gave us the ability to tell stories and to imagine our realities and to create myths that we all agree to live by, right? So we create these myths that we live by. It gave us the ability to have open communication as to how we have created our world and how we might want to change our world. I've talked about this before, about the stories that we tell and whose perspective we tell it by. And because we have this way of communicating, we're able to gather in large groups of strangers. He says, put 1,000 chimpanzees in a baseball stadium or on Wall Street and mayhem would happen. But of course, we can do that, in non-pandemic times, where we know how to gather in these large places because we've created stories and rules and agreements and commitments and laws of how we might be together. And so Harari talks about how this social aspect of us can actually bypass biology in evolution. So he says that big changes in social behavior in animals can't occur without a genetic mutation. So he shares this example. He says there's members of a community of common chimpanzees that have a genetic tendency to live in hierarchical groups headed by the alpha male. That's their genetic tendency. But they are members of closely related species, the bonobos. They live in a more egalitarian group dominated by female alliances. So female common chimps cannot take lessons from their bonobo relatives and stage a feminist revolution. They can't do that. Male chimps can't gather in a constitutional assembly, he says, to abolish the office of alpha male and declare that from here on all chimps are going to be created equal or treated equal. Such dramatic change, he says, in behavior would occur only if there was a change in the chimpanzee's DNA. But we, because we can communicate, because we can tell different stories, because we can come up with agreements, because we can learn from others, we can do exactly that. And he shares the story about in 1789, the French population switched almost overnight from believing the myth of the divine right of kings to believing the myth of the sovereignty of people. And there was a revolution. And in our own country, all over, not overnight. We're still working to that more perfect union. We've had several cultural shifts from claiming our own sovereignty for our people, from slavery to freedom, from oppression of women, from creating equal rights for the LGBTQ community. And we do this by changing that story, by coming together so that we can feel all right in our world, so we can create more equality, so we can become a better, more perfect union. And so this is how we change the ideas, the culture of racism or oppression, because of this inclusion, because we can communicate, because we can share stories, because we can literally get together. This weekend, in honor of John Lewis, my family watched together the movie Selma, which of course is the story of the civil rights fight for voting rights, which John Lewis was very much a part of. And you've seen that iconic picture of him in his overcoat, and the story that he was beaten and almost lost his life more times than just this one time. But this was this dramatic story of people coming together. And it was the scene of people being beaten on the bridge that people saw from the papers and from TV that shifted the consciousness, that began to shift the consciousness. And again, as we know, we still have a long way to go because that's happened several times. I mean, really in my lifetime, beginning with Rodney King and the filming of his beating, and the police officers who were not charged for that, even though we had seen it with our own eyes. And so this is and up until George Floyd, which somehow created this, again, historic shift. And the thing that Obama shared, President Obama shared in his eulogy to John Lewis, which if you haven't seen the funeral of John Lewis and you want to be inspired, watch the whole darn thing. It's beautiful and powerful and such a wonderful honoring of him and his legacy. And President Obama mentions that he says, he didn't know how it was going to turn out. I mean, I can watch Selma and I can know who's going to die and who's going to live and how it's going to work, and that the Voting Rights Amendment gets passed. I know all that. But when you're in the middle of it, you don't know how it's going to turn out. But it's this something inside that says, I am because we are, that I must step forward and must continue to try to change that which needs to be changed, and to change the storyline, to wake up collectively to a different story than the very loud and domineering story that we still have in our world, in our country and beyond, of the white story, the white supremacist story. There's a beautiful TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. And she grew up in Nigeria, but under British rule. And she talks about the stories that she created in her mind, the biases that she had, and because she only had one story, she had only one way of looking at things, and she shares several experiences of that. She tells a story about some American, when they found out she wrote a book about um, she wrote a novel that was centered around a male protagonist who was abusive. And this American had read the story, and she kind of lamented to her the fact that all Nigerian men were abusive just from reading this one story. And she kind of quips, having just read American Psycho, she says, she returned his pity and called it a shame that all young American men are serial killers. Because if that's the only story you read, that's what you're going to experience. And so when we lump everybody in the one storyline, that creates bias and prejudice and racism. And so she tells about the awakening that she had as this Nigerian girl growing up in a colonial setting, and her family was fairly well off, and they had servants, and she said that her mother was putting together a kind of a care package, and she was going to take it over to the home of one of the people that worked in their home. And she had said that because this family was poor. And Adichie says that she jumps to the conclusion that because they were poor, they must lack virtue and talent. She had had this story, a single story, that anybody that was poor, it was their fault. They must not lack the ability, the virtue or the ability or the talent to get themselves out of poverty. And she said she went with her mother to this home of this family. And when she walked in, it was like this whole world opened up to her, that it was this rich family life. And the people were artists. The family members were, quite competent and talented. And when she got to know them, she realized, oh my gosh, I would have always kept that one story if I hadn't expanded my circle, if I hadn't gotten out of that to be able to see people in their individuality, this way of expressing themselves. And so this is our path, to not depend on that single story that we might have been told. When I heard that story by Adichie, I was reminded of my own single story that I had. In my own experiences, I have a lot of single stories that I have been working on to evolve from. But one of them that came to mind to me was a story of when I was growing up. I went to a very small town, small school. Went to school with the same 35 kids. I mean, we had 35 kids in our class, and I went to the majority of them I'd known since kindergarten. So we had this small school, small world, and we had a janitor. His name was Jake, and Jake the janitor was kind of a permanent fixture throughout my years as a kid growing up. And I had a single story about him. I mean, he was a janitor. He was very quiet. He didn't talk. He didn't ever seem like he was in a good mood. I just saw him as a single story of that he was just this janitor, and his whole life was in the school. And I know that maybe you might have had an experience like that. If you were a kid and you saw your teacher at the mall and you realized they lived outside the school, Tamara's probably had that experience where it's like, oh, they have a life. They're real people. They're not just sitting in the classroom all the time. So I had this experience of Jake the janitor, and when social media came around, I was able to get on a Facebook page for the alumni of our high school, and there was a lot of people there, not just the people that I knew because it was all the years, and so there were people there that I didn't know personally really well, or I might have known their name, but someone brought up a story about Jake the janitor, and another person mentioned that Jake was her grandfather, and then she started telling stories about what a wonderful man he was, and how creative and artistic he was, and what a wonderful grandfather and father, and that he sat on the school council, and he was did all kinds of volunteer work, and he was funny, and she's like sharing this, and of course, as my adult self, of course I know that's true. Of course I know that every single person in the world are individuals and have lives, but that little girl in me still had that story. of like, oh my whole childhood growing up, I saw Jake as the janitor and not as this complex human being with, all that goes to. And it made me really look at how that single story can fuel prejudice, can fuel bias, can fuel judgment. And so we're all guilty of these single stories. And hopefully I'm not the only one, me and Udici. And that as we do this, this idea of expanding our bubble of reading history and stories from not the dominant culture. And so that means if you're African American, if you're a person of color, that means reading stories from your own culture, because it may be that everything you have seen, is a white culture. And so Layla Said in her book Me and White Supremacy talks about this concept of white centering, that whatever the situation is, it's told from the white person's story. And even in stories of challenging civil rights issues, oftentimes still center around the white savior, still center around the white person that helps. Think about The Help or the Green Book, which won an Academy Award. It's still surrounded. Dances with Wolves, which was a very eye-opening experience for me, was still, it's the Native American plight and struggle, and it still was a story of a white man. So one of the ways that we can expand our awareness is again to put ourselves into a position to understand a different culture, a different experience, a different way a story is being told. And now with streaming services, that can happen so easily, right? We have all kinds of ways to visit other cultures. And I know that in this book study that I've been doing with this Me and White Supremacy, there were people that said, when I go on Netflix, if I see it's a cast of all Black people, I think it doesn't pertain to me. Like, this is awareness of like, oh, I skip by those stories. And so there's like this commitment to begin to watch stories, and not just stories about civil rights, not just about slavery, not just about the struggle, but just everyday life. Robert and I have been having fun. We've been watching a comedy called Kim's Convenience, which is about a Korean Canadian family in Toronto who run a convenience store. And so you get to see that family. Oh, and if you want a really good drama, watch Greenleaf. Greenleaf is about an African American family who run a church dynasty in the South. And as a minister, I can kind of relate to the pastor daughter there, but it's just really great, juicy drama that doesn't have any white faces in it. It's an expansive experience. So I'm not making light of this at all. I'm laughing at my own, small bubble, and realizing that, some of the simplest ways for us to get together and feel all right is to open ourselves up to other experiences, to break out of the dominant culture, to see people in, all kinds of different ways that we may not have seen them before, so that we can tell a different story, so that we can be part of that social evolution. Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, says, our survival as a species depends on our ability to recognize that our well-being and the well-being of others are in fact one and the same. We need to realize that I am because we are. And so how are you expanding from your single story? I guess we began this week of looking at inclusivity in action. Where have you been in a bubble? Where have you found a comfort zone? What are you willing to do to begin to hear a different story, to learn something new about a culture that may not be your culture, or outside of the dominant culture of whiteness that we so find ourselves swimming in? So that's your homework for the week as we go down this path of inclusivity in action, and deepening into this idea of Umbutu, which is I am because we are. So let us take that into our prayer time. And if you have had a prayer request that you would like prayer for, this is the time for you to put that into our chat, and I will add that to our prayer. So let us just close our eyes for a moment and just move into that place of breathing into the recognition of the divine, that one unity expression of life, of love, the allness that we each are a part of. So I claim and know that there is this powerful one expression of life that is ever available, that is all that there is. And within that expression of this allness, of this oneness, is this beautiful, unique, divine expression expressing as me, that I am a individualized expression of this one. And so it's my choice in this moment to claim that truth for myself, that individualized expression that I am of the one is one of love and of peace and of wholeness and health. And I know that as I claim this for myself, then I am able to also speak that word for each person within the sound of my voice, whether you're in our Zoom room or you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and later on, just connect right now with that divine truth of you, that there is a unique individualized expression of that one. And that power and presence today guides each of us in this path of recognizing that I am because we are, to recognizing that we are connected and dependent on each other, and that we grow and expand when we acknowledge that, and we love, and we share compassion and kindness and curiosity about each other. And so I know that as we go about this week, as we deepen into this idea of inclusivity in action, we find our ways to indeed expand our bubble, to be in a place of connection and kindness and compassion, of love, of letting go of that single story. So this is the truth that I claim for us today. I know that it is already done. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for this time to be able to explore these ideas, to know this truth, to put it in action out into the world. And so with this word, I release it into the law with gratitude and love. And we know this together by simply saying, and so it is. So we let it be. And now we're going to turn to Nina Gibson, who's going to share some music for us today. So welcome, Nina.
Okay, took off the mute. So beautiful, beautiful message. Thank you. The song that I'm going to sing today is a new song, and it really ties into your message because it's called Songbird, but it really, in my mind, is about the birds have something to say right now, and they're much louder than they have been because we're quieter. And so are we listening to them, and what are they telling us? And they work together and together create a ballad, how they switch off to each other. So that's what this song is about. Songbird, you greet me at the entrance of the wood. Songbird, welcoming, inviting me in. I hear you loud and clear here. Songbird, you pass me on to others on my way. Songbird, awakening the music in my soul, I find myself in your song here. Songbird, you sang to me, you rose above. Wings of color lift me up, painting earth and sky with wings of love. Songbird, you sense each other chiming in on cue. Songbird, weaving tunes and rhythms all your own. I'm grateful for your ballad sung today. Songbird, you sang to me, you rose above. Wings of color lift me up, painting earth and sky with wings of love. Songbird.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you so much. All right, so we just have a couple announcements before we leave today. This is a time if you want to share your financial good with us, that's always available, and we'll just show with you how to do that if you're watching us online. Here we come. So here's our affirmation that we share, and so you can just say it out loud with me. The presence of spirit within me blesses everyone I meet, tends to heal everything I touch, brings gladness into the life of everyone I contact. Therefore, I'm a blessing to myself, to humankind, and to the day in which I live. And so you can always text your donation, phone number's there. We have Cash App, our mailing address, PayPal. You can always go to our website, cslleesburg.org, and there's a donation button there. So we are so appreciative of all our financial support. And our activities this week include our 2 offerings during the week. Charlene leads our dream study, and you can just go and everybody kind of talks about the dreams and what that might mean and insights for you. And then on Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern time, I lead a unified mindfulness practice. And so you don't have to have any prior experience. You can come to that at any time and deepen and learn a specific form of meditation, which is really powerful. And also, this is the last day to sign up for, or the last week, I guess, to sign up for the book study that I mentioned. There are 2 book studies starting. I just finished up the Minister book study, and we have one for practitioners starting tomorrow night, and one for members, non-minister, non-practitioner. You don't have to be a member of CSL to take it. It's for anybody. And that's going to be on Tuesday evenings at 7 Eastern. And if you go to our cslleesburg.org and go to events, happenings, you can go and find the meditation, the dream group, and the registration for the book study. So everything you want is right there. All right. So our pearls, we're going to stop sharing in a minute on Facebook and YouTube. But if you would like to stay and connect and talk about what you might be taking away from this message today, this theme, or just to have some social time together, connection, that will happen too. So let's just go ahead and place your hand over your heart as we do our final affirmation. And let's really focus into that divine presence and say out loud, I am love. And open your eyes. And if you're on our Google Meet, you can say, you are love, or it could be someone in your home or in your mind's eye, just really connecting with I am, you are, I am love, you are love. And then it's all love. And so send some love sprinkles to each other. Have a beautiful day and join us in our Google Meet room for more connection. If not, we'll see you next week.